Yeah. So, anyways, what I was saying is, how does your son end up shooting a bigger buck than you, me, Brian, pretty much most people I know personally? And was he 11 at the time, or was he 12 at the time?
Yeah, he would have been 11.
For
Beautiful
those who
deer.
are watching the YouTube version of this, what do you score, Chad?
Incredible.
One guy did one, I think measured 165. The other guy measured 67 or 68. So
Jeez.
I thought we almost had a booner. Because good old dad, when he did the measurements a few beers in, I did I measured 5 mass measurements instead of 4. So
Been there, done that.
So I had him at like 179. And then so I had to take 10 off of that. But to be seriously about how does he do that? I don't know. I guess right place, right time. It's like we've talked on some podcasts before. It's like we talked about gaining permission at properties, and it's like if you're not out there knocking on doors, if you're not out there driving the back roads, things aren't going to happen for you.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy, I was hiking public land trying to find something decent, and my buddy wasn't interested in hiking through all that crap in 90-degree weather, so he stayed in my truck and just drove around and ran into some bucks out in a soybean field, and he was watching them, and the neighbor pulled up to him and asked him if he was okay, if he was broke down or anything, because he had been sitting there for a while. He says, "No, I'm just watching these deer out in the field." He goes, "Oh, you're a deer hunter?" And he says, "Oh, I see your Michigan plates." And so then the guy goes, "Yeah, we deer hunt like crazy. We got like a couple thousand acres." And
Yeah.
so my buddy says, you know anybody that wants to lease? And so the Ohio guy says, "Well, yeah, go down here, knock on this guy's door, go down here, knock on this guy's door, and you got to be able to come up with something." And
No kidding.
that's how it worked. But
Well, tell us a quick story about that buck, and then after we hear that quick story, we'll introduce you and refresh everybody's memory on who the heck's talking.
Yeah, sure. So the farm, we knocked on the guy's door. Well, we ended up knocking on grandma's door. She, opened the door for me like 3 inches. And then, I said what we were doing there. She said, "Where are you from?" "Michigan." And she opened the door wide open. She goes, "Oh, we love Michigan people."
Really?
Yeah.
She's
It
from
was
Ohio.
crazy. Yes.
All you
And
Buckeyes
so-
should take some notes.
Right.
We hear the opposite most times, but I still love Ohio.
Yeah. We've just had, this is 5, 6, 7 years now I've been hunting Ohio, and every landowner that we've run into, this has just been fantastic. We've
awesome.
not had any negative. So anyway, she goes, "Yeah, my son runs the farm. He just went to go get some parts. He should be back soon. Here's his phone number." So I called him. He says, "Yep, I'll be back by the grain bins in about 45 minutes. I said, "Yep, we'll hang out." So he goes, "Well, all the farms are leased out right now to all Michigan guys." He's got 4 or 5 properties around there. He says, "But my home farm, which is where we were standing, they have like their whole family compound. They all live there. It's like 400 acres. They lease that home farm out, but only by the night or the week. They won't do it for the whole season. So he saves it for just guys like us." And he says, "I got one guy that can only come in and hunt 2 days a year. So I want to have a spot for him." And he comes in like November 7th and 8th, and that's all he
great.
hunts. But anyway, he goes, he points up on this hill, and it's like 100 yards straight up. He goes, "Go up there and just go walk around." And so, you look up the hill and you can't see anything because the hill just tops out and there's nothing but sky behind it. So we hike our butts up there, and it's just like this whitetail paradise up top. There's fingers all coming together. There's pastures of cattle and pasture of just hay. And these fingers all come together at a point, and the pastures all come together in that same point. And it's just this natural funnel. And we saw it. It's just like stuck out, when you know what you're looking at and you see a good spot, you're like, oh, damn, that's it. So we threw down some bait, threw up a couple cameras, and it's like in 3 days, we had 3 or 4 bucks over 140 on the camera, on the bait. This buck that Hunter shot, and the Tacticams got very good video. So we got a lot of really good video of this buck.
So you knew what you were hunting. Like you knew what you were, the chance you had, you had an idea.
Yeah, we knew he was around. Like every 3 or 4 days, he'd show up on camera. But we really got to see, because he's got like 3 stickers, and he's got that dagger coming out of the one base. So in the, what's great about the video and the trail cams, is you can watch him turn his head left or right and really get perspective of what that rack was, but the kid, we had a 10-point opening morning of the youth season. It was cool because we had a ground blind. It was built in the brush, and so our only shots were like straight out the front 2 windows, but we could sneak in the back. So we come in the back door of the ground blind, pretty much hidden, because our bait and that metal was all down in this bottom. So we could basically get into the tent without being seen. And so opening morning, we get in the tent and we're sitting there. I always got in that spot. I always got in like an hour early, just because there's so much activity through there. I just wanted to get in early. We get in early. I think I took a nap, starting to get light out, and I put my binoculars up, and this giant 10-point, probably 150 to 160, is on the bait with some other deer. I said, all right, bud, here's our chance. It's open in the morning. We got about 15 minutes to go before shooting light. And the buck was still there. It was still there, still there. I said, oh, we got 4 minutes. And that buck turned and walked 15 yards out our left window. I said, it's not legal shooting hours. I said, you decide, but we probably shouldn't shoot him. And he says, okay, let that deer 150-inch 10-point walk at 15 yards. Couple hours later, he passed up a 125 to 130-inch 11-point that gave us shots all through the day. He kept coming back through that crossing, I think, looking for does, because the does were hanging out at that bait. And so the bucks just kept coming through, checking that bait spot. So he passed that deer up, and he says, Dad, that's going to give us some really good karma. That big buck with the stickers is going to come out. So the next morning, that was like the first deer we saw, was that big one. We didn't know it was him. It was foggy, misty, hard to see. And I just saw a giant bodied deer come out. He was at 80 yards. I put the binoculars up, and I just saw giant rack, and I put the binoculars down. I said, hurry the hell up, get the gun on the shooting sticks. He's going to be out, because he came out where we had never had seen deer before.
Makes sense.
So I grunted, and he stopped, and that gave him 80 yards. He shot him right through the heart, and he ran a little ways. And
beautiful.
So yeah, that's the long version of that, but it's a cool story. Him passing up those other deer, did the right thing legally with this giant, which I don't know about you guys, but back in the day, I might have, well, this is recorded, right? Yeah. It's that would have been a tempting issue when I was 16, 18 years old.
Yeah. Well, my
you had to be
dad,
proud of him for that, though.
Yeah. Props for that. Like Brian just said. And my dad, always raised the very ethical way with hunting. And he nobody really taught him besides my kind of adopted grandpa. So the fact that he pushed that so hard on us stuck with me for a long time, where I have buddies that have done some things, and it's like, just it's either it's your morality or it's not. So the
Yeah.
fact that you have him, trained, if you will, or raised right is awesome. So well done.
Yeah, he's well above his age for hunting. I mean, he's out right now shooting his bow and he's got the binoculars out. Brian, you weren't on. Yeah, but right. I live on 10 acres here and our yard is on like 3. And then there's a county ditch that runs right behind our house and it's all tree lined. And then behind that, we have about 7 acres of tillable. And so that's where I play with my different plots and seeds and
Yeah.
early successional stuff. Well, there's a pretty good 10 point out there right now. We could shoot him from the barn. He's about 125 yards out this pole barn window right now. So he's
Nice.
getting that itch too. I don't know about you there in Ohio, but no, he's just pointing at me. There's 3 bucks out there now.
Oh wow.
They're in the hayfield now, so they're even closer. Our mornings, our nights and mornings are been getting nice and cool in the 50s and stuff here. So it's like all my buddies you're all starting to get that itch is coming on, right?
Oh yeah.
That little buck fever is starting. As soon as August hits, it seems like it's kind of when the switch flips a little bit. But you got a new lease, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we picked up something a little bit closer to home. That Zanesville lease where I met you last year.
Mhm.
Had some dinner. That was a good time catching up with you guys there. That's about 2 hours from my house. And this new one's about an hour and 25 minutes, hour and a half. And it's in Guernsey County. So
Okay.
yeah, it's 241 acres. So we picked up an extra 110 acres from the 134 we had. And there was a 200 killed on the neighboring property, I think 5 years ago.
Nice.
And then a booner killed a couple years back on this farm. So
Sweet.
they're there. I think the first couple days, my one lease partner, Dave Ham, had a bunch of really nice bucks, nice bachelor group on his trail camera within, I think it was the first week. They were all, like you said, within, 130, 140. And there was a couple hanging in the background. They're a little camera shy. They look a little bit bigger. And the landowner took a couple of pictures one night he was out. And I think the 2 that are in the background that are camera shy, I think it's those bucks because they look a lot more impressive. But yeah, it's a fun experience. Jake Corngable knows this landowner through some other contacts, and it's kind of fun dealing directly with the landowner instead of a lease company. Not that we've had any bad experiences, but it's kind of nice to have that direct link. And I was posting the other day, I went down to spray because he told us there was 3 spots we can put food plots, and he had them all brush hogged for us, ready to go. I was like blown away.
Nice. Yeah.
Wait, so out of that whole story, which is amazing about the lease, you met Chad somewhere with beer and chicken wings. Is that right?
That
I
was the best
invited
part.
you. You went home, Jared, because you said you had to keep the wife happy. Remember, you went home early. I think you were down there that week.
Was this last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went home and shot a buck that night. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was right. Yeah, you went home.
Yeah, we got beer and chicken wings, and you got a buck.
Oh, I'm just saying, every time I meet Chad, I also have beer and chicken wings. So it's like it's kind of a theme.
It's a pattern.
That's why I like hanging out with Chad. So.
There's a reason why I've had triple heart bypass surgery already, right?
I tell you, the spot in Lansing that we go with all the beers on tap is a good spot. I forgot what spot that's called, but
it's nice and cozy in there, and it's nice. Yeah, a lot of beers.
Yeah. I forgot that was actually last year that you guys did that. Must have been because Brian, you went home for a night for your daughter's thing, and then I left the next morning or the morning after. I had to get home, obviously, for the wife. Big part of it. Shot a deer. Actually didn't tell her I was going straight to Jackson to shoot a buck before I went home, but
she doesn't listen to this anyway. So
no, it's a small detail. Don't let the details get in the way of a good story. But,
yeah, right.
No, that's good to
hear. Or
the
truth. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Exactly.
Brian, did you give up Zanesville then?
No,
he's got it.
Oh,
I'm never giving up any leases. I've got 3, and I'll never give any of them up. unless I'm forced to, if a leasing company or a landowner decides to pull them, because it's impossible to get them.
What's the third one? PA? Back home?
No, I'm helping Corey fill that one down in Cincinnati.
Gotcha.
But the issue with that is, well, I probably shouldn't go into too much detail on it, but it's in his name.
You talking the
and-
209 that we used to hunt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in his name, and that leasing company does it the right way. They don't let you just transfer it because they have people waiting. So we
Gotcha.
can't take it out of his name, but
Gotcha.
I can hunt that if I want to. I got my name on there. I got it filled, and then I'm going to keep these other two going. So just something nice to have.
Yeah, you should go check it out. Take a hike up that hill down there at the 209.
Yeah. The new guy that's leasing it was pretty impressed by that.
By the hill.
Yeah.
Hey, there's some bucks there though. Bucks the
Oh,
size of Buicks. They're
that guy
huge.
killed a slammer that leased it last year.
Last year. Yeah, big old.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, dude, huge.
Cincinnati's awesome area.
Yeah,
It's
more,
almost like a little sleeper area of Ohio, I think, from
yeah. That's like Adams and Brown County would be like Cincy area.
It's more east of Cincy, I think.
It's like straight south of Columbus pretty much. But yeah, to your point, Brian, you cannot find a lease. And if you do, hang on tight because there's 25 guys behind you ready to buy it.
Sure.
Well,
Mm.
guys, we got the old dream team back together here. This is a different episode we're doing tonight. We're gonna do some wetland habitat improvement. Had a lot of requests for that, talking to people, land plan clients, etc. But and we're gonna save that for another day with Chad, with some U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks that we've worked with in the past. So tonight we have a property. And again, we've never done this before, so bear with us. Chad, what's 37 acres?
correct. Yep.
And we're gonna go through it like almost like a land plan, kind of give you our thoughts, pros and cons, how you fix this property up to make it what Brian would have, what Chad would have, or what I would have. And this will be the picture of the podcast episode itself. The thumbnail will be the aerial of this shot. I'll also probably link it to our Facebook page in the show notes here. That way you guys can see what we're looking at, but a little bit different. We're trying something new here. So basically what we thought was, let's take this blank slate. Let's talk about what we don't like about it first. Talk about what it is, and then kind of explain off the cuff what Chad would do, what Brian would do, what I would do to make it, something you want to hang on to, 5-year goal, 10-year goal, that sort of thing. So, Chad, why don't you maybe explain the property, kind of where it's at, what it looks like. I have a picture pulled up here and I can share my screen. So what I'll do is I'll put this on the YouTube link as well. There are street names on the screen, Chad. Is that okay? Or do you want to wait on that?
Yeah, probably not.
Let's wait on that because this could be something bigger, guys, in the future. So what we'll do is I'll clean that up and we'll get it down there. But
Yeah.
why don't we talk about the 37 acres, kind of what it is, what you know about the area. It's not far from my 15, to be honest with you. And then, Brian, I sent it to him earlier. I told him to kind of, see what you like, what you don't like, sort of thing. So we'll break it down from there. Oh, and first of all, sorry, before we do that, Chad, introduce yourself. I mean, you've been on episode 33, 87, 108, and 135. You're probably the most common offender besides Brian on the Habitat podcast. And he's the co-host, so you can't really beat him.
That is a damn shame, is what that is.
You've been on
If I'm-
at least 4. That's all. That's what I could find. You might be on more than that, but
So that means the biggest bullshitter then, right? That's
we only hire the best and talk to the best. So yeah.
right on. Yeah, so Chad Thelen, Stony Creek Outdoor Properties and Lake States Realty and Auction. Realtree Land Pros. Yeah, been on several times talking about some real estate stuff, a lot of habitat stuff. I've been doing habitat work with my dad since the 80s, doing it as a business since about 2002. And then the habitat work evolved into the real estate work. And so, what we're going to talk about today is about, how those two things mesh together, and the importance of your listeners to whether there's a lot of habitat consultants that are also real estate agents or brokers, a lot of very good ones, and that comes about by necessity, right? So whether you hire me or anybody else, I think it's very important to have a habitat consultant look at the parcel that you're wanting to buy, even if he isn't an agent or a broker. One of you guys,
Yep.
Jared or Brian, consult with them, and because different eyes on a different piece of property, just like the one we're talking about tonight, makes a huge difference, right? Because
Sure.
Jared, you quickly, kind of blew this property off, no fault of yours, but then it's like, well, hold on, wait a minute. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do that.
Yeah. So to your point, let me add some more color to that. Chad sent me the picture last night because it may be for sale in the future. And I'm like, all right, send it over. I'm interested. And
Me too.
yeah, Brian. Yeah. I mean, Brian and I have been talking about getting a habitat podcast project together for years, and it's the wrong side of the road. And I looked at it pretty briefly, and what that means to me was access with the westerly wind. It's one of my like top 3 or 5 things that the boxes that have to be checked before I will even spend another 5 minutes looking at it. But to add, more to your comment, like there are many people that offer that service. Chad, I'm sure you would do it. We'd be happy to do it. Look at a piece of property if you're looking to buy it, want an extra set of eyes before you offer. We can point out things. We've seen 1,000 of these things. Chad, you've probably seen 10,000 of these things, and we can point out things that maybe you haven't seen. To your comment about another set of eyes, I mean, all of our land plan clients say, I want more sets of eyes. Literally, that's probably the most common thing they all say.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm doing it right. I want to do it myself, but I just want to, a little confirmation. So continue onward.
Yeah. So no, it's in, like I say, I've been doing this for 20 some years, but I don't think there are any experts in this business. There's guys with experience, some more than others. Everybody looks at a piece of property. I guarantee if all 3 of us walked into a piece of property and we didn't say a word as we walked it, if us 3 just went and walked a 40-acre parcel in the middle of who cares where, if we just took mental notes for an hour and then went to the local pub and sat down and talked about it, I bet we would all have different opinions about the good and the bad. I almost can guarantee it.
And that's what we're doing tonight on this show.
Yeah. So again, I've been doing this for a long time, born and raised on a farm, but I've still asked friends and colleagues, will you come walk the property that I've been hunting with for 40 years and I grew up on, and it's 4th generation? I've showed them, they're like, why don't you have a tree stand right there? I'm like, I don't know, and he says, well, you got this coming through, you got that coming through. I'm like, I probably walked by this tree 185 times and I'd never thought about that. That's my daughter. If anybody can hear her, she's riding her hoverboard around me. If it gets too noisy, let me know.
No, mine just came in here too, asking where
I
mom
seen
was.
that. She's making faces out in front here. Go. So yeah, eyes, and it's, that kind of work. I mean, if I love doing that meat and potatoes stuff of real estate, there's plenty of transactions that I do where the guy, because of internet and social media and aerials and Onyx and all the other apps and stuff, you don't have to walk a property 3, 4, 5 times anymore before you buy it. Most of your work's done looking at aerials, doing a drive-by, looking at Onyx. So a lot of times by the time somebody's getting a hold of me, they're about ready to pull the trigger and buy the piece of property. But
Interesting.
I just tonight, 15 minutes before we got on this call, the buyer just sent me his pre-approval letter. So we're ready to write the purchase agreement tomorrow morning on a piece of ground that we spent less than an hour walking. It's like, yep, I've seen it online. I've done my, I've looked at everything around it, the neighbors, neighboring parcels, and they were done.
Awesome.
It was just
Congratulations.
that quick. But that wasn't as fun to me.
Sure.
This guy wasn't into food plots. He wasn't into the habitat. He wasn't into the timber or TSI or any of that stuff. He admittedly said he didn't know anything about that. He just wanted a piece of ground for his kids and his grandkids to come hunt with him. He didn't care about the rest. I love the fact that what his reasons were for buying it.
It's the best.
But I didn't get to dive into, where here's these silver maple trees, we can get rid of them. It'll increase, the knocking this canopy down of the silver maple will, all that stuff, bring in more browse, thicken things up, all that stuff. I didn't get to do any of that with this transaction. The ones I love is where we really dive deep into what the property, is and then can be, because that's just putting the whole package together. That's taking my habitat knowledge, with the real estate knowledge and then putting it all together. That's the fun stuff to me. So this 37-acre piece has got, even though I haven't walked it yet, we're still negotiating with the seller on whether or not he even wants to sell, because we're in a weird time right now with, property values are, they're, it's a whole nother conversation, but they're holding steady, if not still increasing in value, even though our interest rates are going up. So many people have cash still to purchase things that these interest rates aren't affecting them. So that's what this seller of the 37 acres we're talking about is going through in his mind. Do we need to try and hurry up and sell and capture this still increase in property values, or if he wants to wait to see if we're going to go through a little recession, prices will drop, and then we'll get out of this recession, and then the price will come back up again. So that's the limbo that we're in. But yeah, so this property has got a lot of things going on with it. It's got 2 different sources of income, tillable and a gas lease. But the access is challenging, which is what you have noted. And to be honest with you, Jared, when I first looked at this property, access because of the wind never even entered my mind. So the property that I grew up on, we have horrible access. Our tillable and access is all on the west. The cover and bedding is all on the east. So, when the deer come out of the bedding and the cover, they're walking into the wind, and, that's where we are.
Right.
So I've just dealt with that for 35, almost 40 years. So it didn't even dawn on me at all. So then when you brought it up, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's something then that I didn't think of immediately. You brought it to my attention, and then I immediately
First thing I saw. Yeah.
And what did I do? I immediately went into Well, we can fix that, no problem.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna get into. And that's what's interesting. Like you said, if we all walked it quietly, Brian, you and I, and then we all came out, went to the bar, had a talk, we'd all probably come up with different things. And that's what I want to do here. So I guess if you can, Brian, you have the aerial. First of all, Chad, I guess why don't you explain kind of just briefly what it looks like? I mean, like I said, the picture will be in the thumbnail. We have, it looks like cover out to the west. It was 37 acres total. Go ahead and tell us about the rest of it as far as you know, and then we'll get Brian's opinion next on what he's seen so far.
Yeah, so it's, full disclosure, I haven't walked it yet. This is all aerial work, but again, you can solve a lot of your questions just looking at the aerial and looking at the neighborhood. So
Sure.
it's 37 acres, but it's laid out like a typical 40. It has all the same dimensions all the way around. The reason it's not a 40 is because the southwest corner of the parcel has got a house and barns on it that have been cut out. So that's why it's the 37 and not the 40. But all the way around, the entire perimeter of the property appears to have timber, trees. The east end is more of a woods swamp type situation. But the north and south ends, so for for the listeners, it's on a north-south road, and it's on the east side of a north-south road. So your access would all be on the west side, unless you get to know a neighbor or something, and access from a different side. But you've got options both walking in from the north end going east or walking in from the south end going east, and could potentially even have some cover walking right down the middle of it where there's a stream that cuts through the property going east and west, and then there's a waterfowl or duck pond on the far east. So
And when you
Jared,
say woods, like Chad, like woods on the north and the south and I guess would be the west end by the road, it's more of a fence line, right? At least it looks to me like a fence line. The north fence line has a little, I think, more robustness to it. Because there's tillable fields there, income,
yep,
right?
yep. And to note, just so I don't forget about this a little bit later on, but in the notes, or when you show this aerial, your listeners should note that it's 24 acres tillable out of a total of 37, which makes it more than 50% tillable, which puts you in the different taxable bracket.
You're a farm now.
It's taxed as ag.
Yep.
They can't tax you as recreation. You've got over the 50%.
I'm getting screwed on that right now on the 15. Yep.
So, what would that help you in the long run on taxes? Can you overlook some of the maybe the prevailing wind issues, right? Overlook that a little bit, because you're going to save. I mean, I wouldn't doubt, if this had less than your 50% ag, in this farm, this piece was in a certain family for 50 years, and somebody from outside the family came and purchased it, and that property came uncapped for taxes.
Oh, yeah.
We've had real estate deals fall apart because a potential buyer talked to their tax advisor or their accountant, and they got, to figure out what could happen there. And it was like, oh, holy crap.
Yep.
We can afford the property, but we can't afford the taxes after that. Right. That's pretty sad. So yeah, so there's not as much woods or quote unquote cover on this property now because there's more tillable than woods. But like we've talked in previous podcasts, what can we do with that tillable? Lots of government programs.
Yep.
We spent an hour and a half talking about all those probably, a year or 2 years ago. So boom, there's another solution to the problem. Take that tillable, you still get an income out of it, keeps you in your ag bracket, and now it's cover. You can put food plots within those CRP or wetland programs. And now you're sitting in the best of both worlds. On a piece of ground, 37 acres, it's going to be under $200,000. That's in most people's budget, for a payment, purchase of ground like that. So
Dude, I
have I
mean,
sold it to you yet?
you got my attention. That's for damn sure. And I think that, that was episode 33 where we went on for maybe 2 hours even on all the government programs. And that was back, episode 33, Brian. What was that? Like 3 years ago? Probably.
Yeah.
3.5. Like Brian and I were, or at least speaking for myself, I knew less about what programs you could take advantage of at that time. And 24 being tillable out of 37. I mean, 16, or I guess I would say, yeah, you're 13 acres of cover and 24 acres tillable. Well, I have 15 acres right now, so 13 acres of cover and 24 tillable income earning ground. That's like in addition to what I have now type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's interesting,
And so look at where, so you've come down to 13 acres roughly of maybe huntable, but again, for a potential buyer, looking at a piece of ground, look at where the 13 acres of non-tillable is. Look at how many different pinch points, little spots that you could hang a tree stand. It's not like it's just a 13 acre square block of woods in one corner where you probably only could hunt one guy. On this the very north side, there's that little that little wooded spot that juts out. I mean, that's a huntable spot. That whole center piece that runs east and west that kind of divides the property. Obviously there's spots there for 2 or 3 tree stands. Then you've got that south line room for a tree stand. This isn't just a square block where you're pretty darn limited, right? I mean, you could go out here legitimately if you wanted to. You wouldn't want to do this a lot, but you could go out here with a couple buddies on an evening and 3 of you hunt this 40, right? And all be a few hundred yards apart. So that, that's something to look at too when you're looking to purchase land, is where is that habitat?
Yeah.
If it's all in one spot, it's just you. If you got no friends and you're just going to hunt, then fine. Right.
Yep.
But this one lays out pretty good. And
well, go ahead, finish your thought, then I'm going to move on.
Well, and then looking at the neighboring properties, because you and I discussed this on the phone today, there's so much habitat all the way around this. I mean, you could probably sit in a tree stand on the side of the road in a couple spots of this property and probably have a pretty decent hunt. There's a lot of movement that is going on all around this whole parcel. And we didn't talk about yet that it's in a very good county in southern Michigan. Good deer numbers, good mix of ag and woods and swamp and fence rows. And so, that's the other key point too, is it's in a good county. So, which we can say it's Calhoun County.
Yeah.
So it's one of the top, counties in Michigan. So go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. I don't want to influence Brian in his opinions by us telling him everything about it quite yet. I want to hear about the killer from PA on what he has to say about this, point blank, without any,
Did you send him the trail cam photos?
No, I did not.
Okay.
There's
nothing huge on there, but okay.
Yeah, we're going strictly. Brian and I have done this. We've looked at a few properties in the past, and we've done this a little bit.
Couple.
But yeah, Brian, I want to get your opinion be brutally honest. What what do you like? What do you don't like? And then at the end of this conversation, when we're all done with our opinions, we're gonna talk about what we would do to fix this, kind of like a land plan, right? Like what we would do to make this workable, or improve it, I guess you should say.
Yeah. So first thoughts, you guys talking about access. I mean, it's definitely an issue, but it doesn't bother me. I mean, Chad hit the nail on the head. It'd be very easy to bring, an access road across the north border or the south border to get you back there. Other thing you could do is bring your food to the west edge and then use some creative landscaping, architecture to kind of steer the deer where you want them to go into that food and take advantage of that. So that doesn't bother me so much with the access. I mean, that could be fixed for sure.
And by the access, let's just be super clear here. The wind normally blows out of the west. This property is on the east side of the road, meaning when you park, the majority of the time, the wind will be blowing towards your farm. Right? Can we all
Yeah.
agree on that?
Sure.
Correct, yes. Yep.
Okay. If there's a northerly or a southerly, we can work with that depending where you park, etc. And that could be part of the solution later. But all right, Brian, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I like the fact that there's open fields on the north and south for the most part to get you back almost to the corners. Hopefully you could have some good relationship with the neighbors and say, hey, do you mind if I zip back to my corner on a e-bike or something now and again? Hopefully that would work out. I mean, that would help you out on that part of it too. So yeah, that doesn't scare me. Another thing that scares a lot of people is they say, oh, I don't want to buy this property because it's mostly tillable. Well, it's kind of nice to have all timber and get some of it cut and make some of your money back. But it's also nice if you buy it in February and you don't have to wait a year or two for a logger to get in there and then clean up the mess and then get the planting. You've already got a blank slate. You can put cover in there with Egyptian weed or any other type of bordering, hybrid sorghum. You can make as much cover as you want. You could do, well, switchgrass is going to take you a few more years, but some of the faster growing stuff like Egyptian weed or things I mentioned, that'll get you those covers and, steering the deer where you want them right away. And that doesn't bother me either. I like to mention that because I'm sure some of our listeners and even some of our land plan clients have mentioned that about too much tillable on certain properties that they passed, but that doesn't scare me either. You just want me to keep rolling with other things that I see?
Well, yeah, I want to hear negatives too. If you have more positives, continue down that road too. But
Yeah, I mean, you know me, when I'm looking at properties, I get excited and it's
yeah, so
kind of hard to
same.
pick out the negatives, but yeah, I mean, if the deer are established there and you've got some established bedding areas on that western edge, it could be tricky to get in there. That's going to be a negative. If you're going to be disrupting, it might take, if you're planning on rearranging this, like I talked about, trying to bring the food forward and bring them forward, it's going to take a little bit of time to get them bedding where you want them and getting your access to where it is. So there's sort of a negative on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, it doesn't look like anything that it can't be fixed, anything that can't be worked with. I kind of like the blank slate myself. Now, when you mentioned 50%, so you'd have to have 18 and a half plus acres in tillable on the 37 to keep it under that tax
Does that
break.
include CRP too, Chad?
Yes, yes, that is a huge talking point.
Good question,
CRP,
Brian.
yes, CRP keeps your tillable or ag status.
Okay.
The Conservation Reserve Program mixtures and different programs within CRP maintains the agriculture of that, because obviously if those programs run out after 10-15 years, and so Yeah, it doesn't change the status of those. It's, yes, it remains in ag. And they've recently, just a side note, I ran into a lot of issues over the years of guys that had hay, alfalfa, so either clover, alfalfa, timothy, orchard grass, mixture plantings for either horses or cattle. Those were not considered agricultural crops. So those didn't fit in as like corn, soybean, wheat, crop rotations. So guys that had, they were farming like everybody else was, but it was just they were farming for horses or cattle as pasture, and it didn't fit in those programs. They've changed that. So now those fields that are hay, Timothy, hay field, everybody just calls them hay fields. Those now are considered agricultural crops,
Well,
commodity.
know that.
So it's let a lot of more landowners be available to get into these programs.
Okay.
I got a little off on a little tangent there. So what were we discussing? The ag status. Yeah, ask me the question again.
No, I
I
think you
missed it.
answered it. You
Okay.
answered it for sure. And I was just curious off the top of your head, what's the advantage to renting it out to a farmer for income versus CRP? Is there a big difference in the payments?
Great question.
Yeah.
It depends on your ground too, doesn't it?
Yes. So it's soil types. So your three most predominant soil types on your property, farm. They take those as an average, and then that's what they just give you as your payments.
Oh, really?
When I say the USDA or Farm Service Agency, they adjust those rates with the farm bill. So the farm bill's 8 years, right? Is it an 8-year cycle or 4? I think it's 8.
I believe it's 8.
But they can do variations to these. So was it back in 2012? So there was a time period where the soil rental rates were not looked at or adjusted for many years. And they were low. They were half of what a farmer would pay. So thousands, if not probably millions of acres came out of CRP, went into ag production. When corn and soybeans were real high in like 2011, 12, 13, and then they took a big dive. So if you can picture this pyramid of farmers paying high rental rates, and CRP was way behind it. And then they got to a farm bill and they said, well, we're going to lose millions of acres of CRP land, which is wildlife habitat and erosion control and lots of other factors with CRP that are the benefits of the CRP. And it all went back into farming. And then there's this shift where the farm bill kicks in again, and they've had the meetings and they're like, well, we need to go from 100 to 175 for this soil type. So that soil rental rate went way up. And so then that, meant all kinds of landowners went, well, now I went back in CRP. I'm not going to lease it to the farmer. I want to do this for the soil, for erosion control issues, for habitat, for wildlife. And then it takes a dive again. And so we're in, so for this area, I think right now, CRP rental rates are very good. There's areas in southern Michigan and southeast Michigan, if you're in the right, and so if you dive deeper into this, there's watersheds like the River Raisin in southeast Michigan where there's a high priority with keeping nutrients and runoff out of Lake Erie.
Right.
You've heard of that, Brian,
The
in
algae,
Pennsylvania?
the algae bloom that Erie has. Yeah.
So anywhere's from like, southeast of Jackson down to Monroe, east of Adrian, south of Detroit. Like a lot of those watersheds all flow into Lake Erie, which Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania border. Those algae blooms have been horrific, and it's
Right.
so anyway, we're getting way off in the weeds here, but so
Pun
there's
intended.
you're right, way off into the autumn olive.
Way off into the algae.
So there's times that CRP is very, very beneficial financially to a landowner, but the rates always are behind, it seems like, what farmers will pay, and
Sure.
but they follow them along. But there's areas in southeast Michigan that you could get $200 an acre being in a CRP program.
Is that high?
Okay.
That's very high.
Really?
I know guys that have had $50 an acre.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
And what's your average tillable rent that you're seeing, Chad, these days in your neck of the woods? You're in God's farming country there. What are you seeing
for
just
what
tillable?
what a farmer would pay?
Yeah.
So that's the other real estate thing that a good real estate agent or broker can bring to the table is here where I'm at in Clinton County. The price per acre can vary per township by thousands of dollars.
Wow.
I don't know, Brian,
Sure.
if that can happen. We're very rural. We're 20 to 30 minutes north of Lansing. But just a couple dairy farms or very productive, strictly ag farm can shift property values by thousands of dollars per acre. It's crazy.
Okay.
So this property that I just sold technically today, Sunday, showed it Sunday. We had some issues, worked things out today, and we're going to get it done tomorrow morning. $3,000 an acre for a 30-acre piece. Northeast of Grand Rapids by a little over an hour. If that property was moved an hour to the south, it would be at least double that per acre. It would be at least 6,000 per acre, if not 7 or 8.
You're talking that my column piece that's sold?
Yep, that's the one I was telling you about today. That
Congratulations.
Sunday we had a deal. Monday morning we didn't have a deal because the buyer got nervous.
That's when we
about the amount
talked. Yeah. Monday.
So, I don't want to beat this to death because there's many, many very good agents and brokers in Michigan, but I took a deal that was done on Sunday. Monday morning, the buyer backed out. Monday afternoon, I was able to work some financial numbers to where the buyer was back in, but needed another day. And now today is Wednesday. We're recording. He's went to the bank, Greenstone, yesterday, and this afternoon already he got his pre-approval. So,
Okay.
we did this,
Okay.
and my background is not sales. My background is in farming and law enforcement. But it doesn't, like, you have to be a good agent or broker, has to just be a good people person, and then just be able to work things. Like, I reduced my commission. This buyer had a good relationship with a title company who were able to give them a credit for the closing costs.
Interesting.
So I reduced a commission $1,000. A title company was able to throw in a $650 credit. The seller gave up 2 box blinds, that together were worth over $1,000. And so
So $2,650 later.
with a little bit of creative thinking, we went from the seller being, or the buyer being, too nervous because it was more money than he initially wanted to spend. But from all the aerial views that he did and the drive-by that he did, he fell in love with the property. We walked it on this past Sunday. And this was the guy I mentioned before, 45-minute walk. He was all in.
Nice.
Very nice.
But then he got
job.
cold feet because it was more money than he wanted to spend.
Was
But
this his
because
first piece?
Yes, he's been leasing. He's been leasing in Western
You
Michigan.
can't judge anybody when it's their first piece. It's a big deal.
And so I told and the first thing I told the gentleman and his wife that were there, and you're going to get no pressure from me. And that's the worst thing. So I'll say this out loud. That's why us guys in real estate, on hunting and farmland, we call ourselves land agents. Because some of your realtors that sell subdivision or city properties, they're not going to be able to do any of this stuff for you.
Right.
You need a land agent to work for you.
Sure.
And so, there's nothing wrong with anybody that sells residential real estate, but they can't answer the questions or put together the deal on a piece of property that a guy just fell in love with, but then all of a sudden realized he got cold feet and needs to back away from. Your land agent knows what the box blinds were worth. He knows what the other things are worth that the seller was willing to throw in. And so the creativity is just fun as hell in real estate. So the up and down went through, but anyway, so tonight, just before we start recording, the buyer emailed me his pre-approval letter.
Boom.
So this is Wednesday afternoon. Monday morning, the deal was dead. Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening right now, it's put back together and I've already got a pre-approval letter for my seller.
That's great.
He's like, holy crap.
Awesome.
How the heck did you do that? I was like, well, it's just, you just just work with, right?
You're
ins and
Chad.
outs of
You're
certain
Chad
things.
Thalen, bro. You're Chad Thalen. You've
Well,
been
we're
doing
trying-
this for a while. I mean, like you said, like the guy doesn't want to move the blinds off the property anyways. Like, how much work is that? How about we leverage that for? I get that. It makes sense. Brian, you had a
Yes.
question.
Yeah, just to circle back to the whole reason I brought up the question about the 50% ag. Sometimes I'm not crazy about, especially on smaller properties, having people rent out their tillable because you lose control of it. If the farmer's going to pull it off in early October, you've got an empty spot.
Good point.
And that's a perfect situation where you mentioned CRP being included. You can get creative, keep your own food plots going, keep it tillable, put as much corn and soybeans or whatever that you want to do, put as much CRP in there, and you've got complete control and still hold your tax status. So sometimes, even if you're not making as much on the CRP, you're gaining that much in control of what's going to be on your property.
And deer cover.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I'm laughing because
Brian nailed it again.
I'm laughing because that was your question like 25 minutes ago. And then
Yeah, we gotta get back to
I
it.
went off on this tangent.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. We love it, man.
You
Get
circled me.
get as much info as we can.
So
So, a lot of this property would be, quote unquote, a dead zone, right? If a dairy farmer, I mean, dairy farmers are getting very close to starting to chop their corn. So,
for silage,
huge difference between chopping your corn for silage or having a John Deere or Case combine come in October or November and harvest that corn. And, when silage is chopped, they leave nothing. You've got bare dirt. But so here's another tangent caveat. You could double crop sometimes. So if you own the land and the farmer is renting the tillable from you and he says, well, I'm going to chop this in September, late August. You've got an opportunity to take all this tillable land and seed it. If you can get a guy with a no-till drill, or if you can lightly disc it, you've got you still have a blank canvas for turnips, brassicas, triticale, wheat, rye, all those other things, and still have a beautiful food plot. It's not the end of the world if you rent your land for $200 an acre. And
sure,
you know what I'm saying, right? If it's soybeans, that's different. That's going to come out October-ish, and you probably don't have many options. But yeah, look at what if you skip CRP and you go direct, you have a farmer take care of these tillable acres. You want to have that discussion with the farmer, what he's going to do with that land.
Yeah, have him leave some acreage, uncut on the back, or what have
For
you,
sure.
right? A
yeah, you
shield
can
from
pay
the
them
road.
for part of that. Yeah,
and pay him for, like Brian said, pay him for part of that. Chad, to your point, right? Like, and not all farmers will do that for you, but if you can, work that in, or farm it yourself.
So what I see also with these tillable acres is I see this as a nightmare for a farmer who is looking to gain the most bushels per acre on these acres. Right.
And
you know what I'm saying?
Why is
Brian?
that? Point it out.
absolutely.
Yeah,
because he's got to make a lot of turns, and he can't just get on his tractor and go straight for 37 acres.
So, okay, here's a great point. That was not even where I was going. I was going to the wildlife end of things. Raccoons, turkeys, possums, sandhill cranes, white-tailed deer. There's so much edges of cover on this parcel, which makes it great for hunting deer, turkeys, squirrels, ducks, all those things. But it's a nightmare for a farmer because all those animals are creeping in off these edges of the wetlands in the timber, and they're all woodchucks. They're all wanting a piece of that soybean. And this guy has got, out of 24 acres of tillable, I bet you've got 15 acres of good crops off this.
Yeah.
So, again, so this farmer, this is a situation where CRP is the better CRP is the better option on this parcel, because the farmer is not going to down the road. The farmer that lives down the road that's going to farm this is not going to want to pay top dollar, because he's going to lose a lot in bushels per acre on this. This is not one of his pieces that he's dying to lease. This is one of the pieces, and this is what I see a ton. A farmer that's gonna, till and farm, if he's 1,000 acres and above, this is one of the pieces that he's only gonna farm because he's trying to keep the landowner happy, right? This landowner may own another 400 or 500 acres in the neighboring area, and he wants to keep all that 400 or 500 acres in his pocket, and he's only going to farm this piece because it's part of the deal, quote unquote deal, right?
Sure.
Get what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
he knows he's probably going to lose money over here, but it's one of those. But I've seen a bazillion of these situations where a farmer has just walked away from a property like this because by the time I get done, there's only, the center, right? The center 10 acres on the one block, and the center 3 or 4 acres on the other block is good. He's getting good bushels per acre. All the other stuff has been decimated by wildlife.
Interesting.
And it's not, so there's, the deer, whitetail deer get a bad rap, and they take the blame for a lot of crop loss. So many raccoons, and it's not so much pheasants but I raised pheasants in about a 1 acre pen, and I would, in the pen, before I'd bring in the young pheasants, I'd plant sorghum and corn inside the fenced off penned area where they're going to come into. I would sit there, I'd watch a pheasant jump up off the ground, jump up and grab an ear of corn and pull it down to where they could reach it from the ground. So you know how an ear of corn, obviously when it's growing, it's pointing up. When the corn cob would mature, they'd grab it and pull it down so they could reach it from the ground. Turkeys are doing that. Raccoons are doing that. Sandhill cranes are doing that. So there's just a bazillion other, wildlife and birds and all kinds of crap that are.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm getting off on a tangent again, but deer are not, they're not the only culprit to decimating this parcel. I'd say that they're one of the least. Deer are what you should worry about the least in decimating your crop. I've watched turkeys and great blue herons. I've watched them walk right down rows and pull fresh young corn and soybean plants right out of the ground.
Yeah.
So anyway, cut this out. Put in something really cool.
Well, we went off a little tangent there. That's all right. I guess so. We have Chad's thoughts on the property. We have Brian's thoughts on the property. I wrote some things down before we started recording. And I wrote some things down as we're recording that we are all copacetic on or whatever.
The hell does that mean?
I don't know. Just so I'll give you my thoughts.
All in agreement. Copacetic.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Kumbaya, Chad. Kumbaya.
Gotcha. I got that.
Got it. Yeah, Lion King reference. So when Chad first sent it to me, my first thought was, okay, I like, tillable, like the cover in the back, but wrong side of the road. And what does that mean? It means predominantly west wind. This property is going to blow from east to west most of the time. My property, I Googled it, is 11 miles from there. Not far.
No kidding. That's it. Wow.
Yep, that's it. So I know it's in a good area. And I'll circle back to this access thing, but I wrote it off. I didn't write it off. I wrote it off right away to you. I'm like, oh, I wish it was on the other side of the road. You're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, this access is gonna burn me. So that was one con I saw. kind of the main con, really. What I liked about it was the income. Okay, we have 24 acres tillable. I learned on the 15 acres that being non-homesteaded and no income on the property, I'm paying a shit ton of taxes. More so than I'm funding Jackson County schools more than I'm funding Livingston County schools where I live, most likely. And that's fine. But so there's I'm learning that with my property I buy in the future, I will have it be more of an asset that gives back versus something where it's just a hunting property you pay for. And what gives good bucks in return, I also want to, do this on a larger scale as I get older. So I thought, well, income is important, lower the taxes, the 50% ag part, that's huge, Brian. I didn't think about that, but that's a main thing that we kind of all came together on. Another one was that marsh in the back. You have some dry land to the north, hickory and oaks, you said. Hickory ain't worth much. Oaks could be something. There's probably, I don't know, 5-6 acres there. But the marsh in the back was what caught my attention. And that's where my property is now. In Michigan, we have to have cover. If you're from Michigan, we have to have cover. There's no question about it. Our deer are nuts. Hunting pressure's nuts. We have to have cover. So that was a pro for me. That marsh in the back on the south side, I guess would be the southeast side. Looks fairly large. I didn't like zoom out to see where it is on a large scale, but we're just talking for this aerial, the purposes here tonight. Edge, Chad, you mentioned edge. I had that written down as well. There's a lot of edge to it. You could hunt there. I'm counting, just looking at it, at least 4 to 5 pinch points without doing anything, without busting the saw out, without planting switchgrass. That's big. It's very big. It's kind of how I capitalized on the 15. So I have, cover, which would be the CRP. I didn't mention that cover is king. I would put it in CRP, no question. I would keep some tillable, or I'd plant it myself. Brian, you mentioned the unhunted or the north and south. You mentioned being able to go on either the north side or the south side and use that as access. Well, looking at the aerial, I don't see any food plots on either of those north or south spots. Nobody's mowing back there. I don't see any blind roofs, from the aerial. So it looks to be maybe these folks are just living there. They're just hanging out. They're not spending a lot of time in their backyard. That's huge. Pressure is huge. That caught my eye. There's no food plot in the back corner on the north side, which I would expect, or the south edge. I would expect a food plot there too. Neither have that. That's advantageous. What else did I have here? I guess the last thing I thought would be kind of rewinding back to the access, right? The wind is blowing from the road into the farm. You wouldn't think that's great. It's not great. But how do big bucks move? Right? How do mature deer move? They move into the wind most of the time, crosswind, into the wind. Sometimes they'll move at the tailwind, but you're doing something here where if it's a majority west wind, a buck will check these fields with the wind. You might have a spot where they're moving into this area more often than not because, well, they're not going to move downwind into a food plot most times. Could be advantageous there. I haven't thought that one all the way through, but it popped into my head. If you have the wind blowing in the buck's face, he's going to move into it. And I'm not the first guy to talk about that. There's plenty of people in the industry to talk about that, but if you can position yourself with an off wind or a crosswind where you're slightly off wind, that predominant west wind might behoove you. So it interesting. I do see more pros than cons. The access con, I'll have to think about that more. But you have deer that move into the wind. If you can park on the very northwest corner and the very southeast corner. I'm talking in that guy's driveway or by the other guy's barn, pretty much. And you plant that in CRP, you put your food plots strategically, you know, with a land plan where you want them. Could be. It could be. You know, I don't know what that timber looks like. Is there any value in that timber? It's not that much. That could be advantageous. Duck
Yeah,
pond, if you like to shoot ducks, that's cool too. I love shooting ducks. I don't know, it's kind of my thoughts. So I guess now that we all kind of threw our thoughts out there, if you bought this farm today, guys, I guess I want to hear your 1, 2, 3 top habitat improvements and you know, kind of high level. Simple, stupid type stuff. What would you do on this property if you owned it? Brian, you go first.
So can I pick when we buy it, or are we talking if we buy it right now?
Right now.
Hmm.
I guess
Well,
wait, I guess why
No, that's good.
why the question?
Because I would approach it differently. I mean, you're obviously not going to have time to grow any cover in that tillable.
Not
right
this
now.
year. Not this year.
Right. Right.
You would say what, buy it December, January for next year type thing?
No, I was just curious if you were putting a purchase date on it. That's all. Because that would change on how I'm going to tackle it. But if we're buying it right now,
No. After season, fresh start, blank slate.
oh,
January
okay.
1st.
Yeah, I mean, being that it's a 37 acre piece, and getting back to what I was talking to Chad about you know, renting it out versus doing it myself. I kind of get it if you have, you know, a large piece of property where the rental income, you need it to help you pay for the payments and pay for the taxes. But if this is something that I could afford and not have to lean on the rent, I'm just going to go keep it myself and try to get something for CRP. So right away, I'm going to get something planted in there that's going to provide cover for the fall, for the following year, whether that's bee and butterfly habitat, whether that's switchgrass. You can even compartmentalize it, do some switch that you know is not going to come in for a couple of years, get some miscanthus started for screening, get some Egyptian wheat for immediate screening for the places that you're going to need it for sure. So I definitely do that. And a two-pronged approach with the cover is to try to do a layout like I discussed earlier with some type of trying to steer the deer where you want them to go. You know, you're limited on access, so you're going to want to make sure they're going the directions you need them to go so you can get in there. So I'm going to address that. So that would be number 2. And then the third one, just try to get some good observation stands up and try to figure out where these deer are moving naturally and take advantage of that.
I like it. And where would you put most of your cover? If you're gonna put cover on this spot, people, you know, they're gonna see the aerial on this podcast. Where would you put most of the cover? Would you say?
Like I said, I would like to play with putting the food further to the west to try to bring those deer out, and maybe put some cover in the middle of those tillable fields, so they're not all bedding way behind you where your wind's going to be blowing. And then again, like I said, trying to be strategic of steering them and thinking about where your wind's going to go, not only from your tree stand, but from your access.
I like it. Yeah, you and I obviously hang out a lot and do a lot of land plans together, don't we? Because
Couple.
I feel like I don't have to talk. Chad, what would you do?
Jeez.
I mean, quick, high level, 3 things, boom. Now it's, you know, the next level property where you'd be like, yeah, this is solid.
Yep, straight into CRP.
Okay.
It just, for this property, it just makes sense. And in each of those 2 fields, designate a food plot in each of the fields. So button hook method. So like you're off the road, you're going to walk past the deer, and then you're going to come up behind them.
Oh, I feel big buck method.
Yep.
which
So
one?
you're gonna, and like we talked about earlier today, there isn't much woods there. There's a bunch of, so
There's behind it on the next property, it seems.
so the caveat to this is right that you and I, none of us have walked this property.
Correct.
We've
So-
we've done the aerial. There's tons of cover in every direction. Typical to, or non-typical to a lot of, say, central Michigan. There's just a lot of cover in this area.
Yeah, it's mostly tillable throughout central Michigan from Mount Pleasant to Ohio.
This area's just got a lot of good deer habitat, and that's why they kill, good bucks in this area. So again, number one is you're in a good area. So then let's tweak. We got to just start diving in. So then the CRP brings you the income. You can still put food plots in those acres. You just have to designate them when you sign up for the CRP.
Okay.
And just because there's let's just say there's 20 acres of tillable, a good point to note is that you don't have to enroll all 20 acres of tillable. You can enroll 15 acres, and then you can keep out, say, 5 acres and do whatever you want with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you did enroll all 20 acres, you can take 10% of those 20 acres, which is 2 acres, and put them into food plots. You're still going to get paid on those acres for a land rent rate, but you're not going to get reimbursed the cost for the seed, the labor.
That's fine.
Exactly.
We all do that for free anyways at this point, right?
So, if I have a name drop on this. So Jeff Sturgis likes to, when he consults and lays out tillable acres and then suggests you put them into tillable, he likes you to put a food plot out in the dead center of that tillable, whether it's 100 acres or 5 acres. If it's on 100 acres, you could do a 5 or 6 acre food plot, which you'd want to split that up a little bit. But if you've got a 10 acre field and you can do a 1 acre food plot, put it dead in the center. And I think this piece of land that we're talking about is exactly perfect for that situation.
Sure.
So, and I'm going at the access issue. So if all the tillables in front, you turn all that into CRP, so that's cover. You put a 1 acre food plot in each of those 2 tillable pieces. You can walk in undetected from the north or south side, and maybe you do bump a few deer. Who the hell cares? In an area like that where there's habitat everywhere, which is similar to like most of Ohio, right? You've just got habitat everywhere and you got tillable everywhere. Deer come from all over the place. But for this piece of property, you could walk past the deer and then come in behind them. Now the wind is all in your favor. But like I just, talked to you about Jared before, is like, you have no idea where if you did that, if you put this whole property to CRP in a food plot, deer can come from every single area across the road, right? There's everywhere. So go ahead and blow out a few deer, right, on that easterly end, because your west winds at your back and you're walking through who cares? Blow out a few deer. But there's tons of different family groups and other bucks that are just laying all over the place around this property. those are the ones that you're after. I don't think the wind access on this property is like the least of, to me, is the least issue for me. Because when you blow up, when you bring up Google and you look up above for like a mile all the way around this place, it's all freaking habitat in food. Who gives a shit about the downwind side of this property? It's like, to me, it's just 100% a non-issue.
Okay.
You're gonna blow deer. I mean, everywhere I've ever hunted, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, you always are gonna blow deer. I'm like, just stop thinking about that. Get into your spot, sit down, shut up, and hunt. Like, in this area. So if you're in a huge ag section where you've got a square mile, 640 acres, and you've only got a 10-acre woods in the middle, that makes a difference. In situations like this Calhoun County property and a lot of Ohio or a lot of Illinois, deer come from, how many times have you sat in a tree stand and went, where the hell did that deer come from? There's no way. Where was he sleeping? Was that deer living in the garage of that house up there? You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
I guess
Like,
it depends on where you're hunting, because like I know what you're saying, but I don't think Michigan is Ohio or Illinois. And I would rather not blow any deer out. So I'm the opposite of you in terms of I'm gonna give a shit about the wind and blowing them out, period. One deer. In Michigan, you have a doe blow on your way in, that buck could hear you from 200 yards away 3 hours ago. It's the way my brain works. And I think that buck might be like, okay, maybe forget about it, maybe you wouldn't, depending on what age class you're going after. And I would be, I'd rather not blow anything out. Good. I see what you're saying. You're in a high density area. I'm 10 miles from there. I get it, but I don't blow deer out when I go into my property. And that's kind of a bold statement, but for the majority of it, I don't. And I think that really helps. And the food plot out in the middle, or what you mentioned the Sturgis does out in the middle, I could see how that could be beneficial with CRP all around you. You're sliding out there to maybe a tower blind up in 10-foot CRP and out there. I'm kind of the opposite though. I do things a little different. I would probably put it all into CRP, and I'd probably carve out the inside corners near the cover that I would TSI. So I would take the hickory and oaks and the marshy side. I'd edge feather the hell out of all that. And I'd probably hunt as close to bedding as possible, because these bucks in Michigan, they don't walk out at 3 p.m. and start strolling around and get to your stand by 5. They walk out at 7:15 and shooting like 7:20. Like, so I'd carve out and to your point, if they're in the CRP, they could be better than that. They'd probably feel comfortable. And to your other point, deer can come from across the road. I would agree with that. North, south, agree with that. So, but I mean, we're just talking an aerial here, but you'd have to, watch that for a year or two to determine kind of how they work.
mhm.
I think that there are a lot of good pinch points. I'd set up the majority in cover because I think cover is king here in Michigan. Different than other states, just because our deer are nuts. I've said that 100 times. And I think that access, my initial off the cuff, this farm's the wrong way, is probably inaccurate. I think you could make this work. I do. And I think that with cover, get some rent going, some food plots going on the corners inside, and strategic access, you'd be pretty good. I would cut the heck out of that timber. The whole east side, I cut all of it real hard, almost Savannah like, and I'd probably make some nice pathways through there with a chainsaw.
Even with that being such a small portion of that property, you would still go in and just cut
Just
the
go-
hell out of that east side.
Yeah, because you'd be your 12 acres or whatever that would be on that side would be different than any 12 acres in the square mile. Nobody else is doing it.
What if it's all white oak?
Then I'd have it timbered and get the money and let it regrow. Cut the hell out of
Okay.
it. I mean, if you can do a QFP program or get on a program where like you can sustainably cut it every 8 to 10 years and make some money off it, I'd probably go that route for long-term investment purposes.
But it's not enough acres to
Yeah, there's not enough for
even
that.
mess with
It's
that.
not.
If
That's what
there's
happened
a
on the 15. That's what happened on the 15. I had to just cut it hard, you know.
if so okay, so let's back up a few steps. 37 acres, 14-ish is timber. That's spread out across the whole property.
Yeah, so you got like
So let's just say on the east side there are 4 white oak trees that are well over 100 years old. How many of those are you going to cut?
oh, you had to throw the old 100-year-old tree. Dang.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's your
If there's 4 on that whole, how long is the 40 on that square? How long is that
just the
distance?
north side, because the south side, the
Is
aerial
marshy.
says it's marsh. So let's just say it's
I cut everything but those 4. I cut the majority
Yep.
but those 4.
and hang a hammock somewhere in there and chill out.
We always talk about cutting trees on this show, but I'm a huge fan of old trees, like a
Oh,
tree
for
hugger
sure.
almost. Like
Yep,
I'm a bit like
yep.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but if there's
me just-
4 in that, and that's probably a 5-acre area up there, maybe. My last woods was 8 acres. I cut it down to where I cut down to a very low basal area. I wish I can remember what it was. It'd be like a savanna in there, in my opinion.
So let me describe this oak tree I found today when we were out spraying, working on a piece of land. So this fence was like, if you touched it, it snapped, like it was just brittle. And it was a square, it was a cattle pasture. And we were driving up to this tree and I'm like, this thing is hundreds of years old.
Very cool. Like an
So-
old wolfy oak, old wolf oak.
It
Limbs
was
going everywhere. Like
the tree, if you were to cut off the trunk, I don't think it would fit in the bed of your truck.
Hmm.
So we pull up to it and it was a corner, right? So back in the quote unquote old days, right? If you see a lot of times you see an oak or a maple tree, it would take 3 or 4 guys to circle it. Those are usually property corners.
Right.
sure, makes sense.
So we pull up and I'm in the Polaris Ranger and I'm in the passenger seat. I got a buddy driving and we're spraying some brush and stuff. And I'm a foot from this tree and I look at the fence. The fence came into the tree and then it turned. It went right through the middle of the tree and then continued east. So, again, this tree is at least 150 years old. But how long was that fence there? The fence it went in the side of the tree and came out the other side of the tree in the
Probably-
dead center.
Stapled to it one day or nailed to it one day a long time ago, and then boom.
But like in 1900,
It's hard to cut a tree of that
It's
age.
crazy.
I have one on my parcel that old. It's not getting cut.
I sat there. I said, "Stop!" I said, "Let's just look at this for a second. This is insane." I'm like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" This fence is coming in the half of the tree and going out the other half. So like in the dead center of the tree was the fence, and it made a turn and went out the other way. I would never, ever, ever, ever think, I don't care what the situation is, that tree is never getting cut on my watch. But so, what kind of tangent did we lose on there?
No, we're just thinking now after we've kind of gone through everything. I mean, I kind of went through everything I had here in terms of introduction to the property, the description, what all of our thoughts would be per person, and then how do we fix it? We
How
did
about
that.
investment? That
We did that.
investment.
So if you were going to buy this as an investment property, let's wrap up on this. If you're going to buy this as an investment property, Chad, I mean, there's not a lot of timber, but we have tillable. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Like, how are you? Give us that perspective. We talk to our friend Neil in Wisconsin all the time about land and investments, and he's a good guy to talk to. He's a fun guy. What would you say about this piece and pros and cons? I guess top 2, 3 pros and cons.
So, I've been on your podcast more times than I should have been.
I think anybody, like I said, besides Brian,
It's not right. And I don't know why I'm not paying enough to do this.
it's because we like you.
So, but have we ever talked about a non-hunter purchasing a piece of land to present it to the hunting public?
I
So
don't think so.
Explain.
this
I'm
is
not sure- yeah, I'm not picking up what you're putting down quite yet.
Michigan is a ridiculously, we talked off air about how hard it is. Like Brian said, I'll never give up a lease because you won't get it back,
Right.
and they're too hard to come by.
Sure.
So this is not your listeners, but from an investment standpoint, let's say Jared and Brian are looking at this piece of property. They're non-hunters. This has already got a gas lease income from a neighboring property. There's not a gas well on this property, but the neighboring property has a gas well, and there are income on this property because of that gas well. There's the tillable income, which you could just leave it as tillable income and rent it to a farmer. You could then, if that's not right for you, you could switch it into CRP. But then there's also the hunting income. So if you and I buy it and don't hunt it, let's lease it out to, this parcel is within less than an hour of Lansing, Michigan. It's less than an hour of Jackson, Michigan. It's less than a half an hour from Battle Creek. It's less than an hour from Kalamazoo. It's a little over an hour probably from Detroit. But hunting, lease, rental rates are off the charts in Michigan. So if you were just an investor, I've seen, so I had a parcel for sale in Eaton County. It was 400 acres. I had a guy offer us $10,000 a year to lease it. It had a
For
track
how many
record.
acres?
400. What's the math?
40.
Not
25 an acre.
That's low if you were to go to Iowa, Illinois, and it's low for even Michigan, but because it was a large parcel, smaller parcels are going to garner, right, double or triple that amount. You could take that 40-acre parcel. There is no doubt, because it's within an hour of Detroit and all these other areas, you could easily lease out that 40-acre parcel for $3,000 or $4,000 a year.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm not,
I would
I
agree.
don't like that,
Sure.
you
100
know,
bucks
like,
an acre. Whew.
oh,
No, Brian, it's silly, man. You could.
it would be gone tomorrow, Brian. You buy it tomorrow, Saturday, I could have it rented for you for just the hunting year round, turkey, duck, deer, $5,000 easy for the
It's
year.
weird. It's
Oh,
weird.
I get it. I
don't
get it.
like
I
it.
fill
much
these
ag?
leases and I throw these numbers out to people and they don't balk at it at all. So
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, you took that 209, you had it filled in what? Hours?
Yeah.
Hours.
And that's, I don't like that situation. And I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to, I hate
I don't
seeing
like the way it's going either.
But,
Because
guys,
it's never going to go backwards. But
It's not about the rules of the game. It's about just playing the game, being part of it. Like, we can't control the rules.
right.
You can't control what stuff's going for.
I make the comparison to people that are interested in spots and they're kind of on the fence. And I say, it's like going to a public golf course or going to a private golf course. You're going to pay a lot more, but you're going to have a better experience. And it's just a matter of your priorities. I mean,
That's a good point.
there's people that are willing to do that.
I like that analogy.
it's, it's unfortunate, but you can't stop what's going on.
Right.
Like you and I, or us three, are not going to change the culture of hunting in any way, no matter what if it's scent control or following the moon phase or the price of a hunting lease or how much Sitka costs versus, you know what I'm saying? Like, none of us are going to change any of those things. So you either pay to play or you just step out of the way. So, I don't like that scenario, but it's what we, it's where we are, right? So, I mean, I'll go against, what we talked about before off the record. If you don't want to pay these prices that leasing companies are handing out, or not necessarily even what brokers or realtors are handing out, get your ass off the couch and off the phone and go drive down a road and knock on a door.
Yeah.
Right.
And people still do it every day.
Oh, I do it. That's, I told you my half-hour story 3 hours ago, right? It's where, but some people don't care. They're like, I don't have the time.
It's just how bad do you want it, Chad? It just comes
Right.
down to anything in life. How bad do you want it? Do you want to be in shape? Do you want to own hunting ground? Do you want a new truck? Do you want to, it's, I don't know. Maybe it's just my brain, but it just comes down to how bad you want it and what is it you want.
When you start adding up the dollars on stupid stuff, like, a friend of mine that's working for me now, we got on a tangent this afternoon. We started, it's like we were driving through a field, right, this morning in Clinton County, and we're driving down a drain, and it's at the back of an 80-acre parcel, and there was two what we called 30 years ago is like, oh man, they must have a bunch of money because they've got a satellite dish in their backyard. Like, back then a satellite dish was a big freaking deal, right?
Right.
Like, holy crap, we're going to go over, my buddy Bill's house because he's got a satellite dish. We're going to watch these movies. Well, like, you start adding up all that nonsense, but those satellite dishes were laying in the back of the 80-acre parcel over a little rise where nobody could see it. Like, they got rid of it but it was laying back there in some of the best deer habitat in the section. And we just kind of both looked at each other like, this is stupid and this is wrong. It's like that satellite dish had laid there for at least 20 years and it's never decomposed and it's not ever going to.
But they're doing it all wrong. You got to pull a Corey Francis and you have to bury it in the dirt level.
Use as a water hole.
It's the best water hole Corey's ever had. It's amazing. Anyways, tangent.
Yeah, no, thanks for stopping me because I was starting to go stupid again.
I'm just saying his satellite water hole, it's amazingly legit. It's cool. But yeah, so no worries. Anything else on the 37 acres here? I think we really broke it down. I just
We beat the shit out of it.
yeah, exactly. Beat the hell out of it there. I mean, we covered a lot of good stuff. I want to do this more often. I want to get parcels on. I want to break them down. It's something a little bit different that we've done before, or that we haven't done before, I should say. And kind of keep that thing going. So, Brian,
Yeah.
any other comments on the 37?
Nope. Just I'd add some corn, beans, alfalfa to start and get some fall stuff. And I don't think I covered exactly what I would plant, but those are three of my favorite early season crops. And then get some grains and brassicas, and makes it easy just to buy the Vitalize. It's got everything in there, and just put that out.
Nice plug.
Fall.
Appreciate
Nice
the plug. Appreciate the plug. Yeah, I mean, it really does. And Chad, how about you? Anything else you want to cover on the 37 or this conversation? We'll have you back on soon when we get the official wildlife guys on. I want to talk about wetland habitat next. So that's coming up soon. We have a lot of requests for that.
That's a good, Brian is a good point about, we keep talking about financials and how to, get rid of the ag exemption and all that stuff, and maybe adding CRP. We're talking about the guys that maybe they're middle class type stuff, right? And they've got the only way they can make this work is if you have all those other things in play. But if it's a guy that's a multimillionaire, how are you going to sell them on this piece of property, right? And so, yeah, skip all the CRP stuff out in that till. Well, this is still a badass piece of property for a guy that can pay cash for this property and give two shits less about, the income off of it. So then how do we change the way we look at that? Not really a whole lot different. We'd still add the same cover, I think. I think a key point, so that we're not sounding like a commercial, is, there isn't a whole lot different I would do to that property if I was a multimillionaire and just was going to drop 200 grand on this property. Is this still a good piece to hunt? Hell yes, it is. It's maybe not your main parcel, maybe, right? Maybe you've got a few others, but this is I had a guy tell me, you need a property to blow your wad on in October because you're all geeked up to hunt, right? It's been a long summer. You want to go out there and hunt, but you don't want to burn up your main property or good property or whatever it is. It says you need a blow your wad property, whether that's a lease or a 10 acre parcel, whatever.
Mine's a lease. Yeah. Or a public ground.
You betcha. Just get out there, knock the dust off. And, this is.
Brian has like 8 leases, so he's got it covered.
Yeah. Anytime you want to, throw a buddy a bone, we'll.
Three leases and a bunch of permission. I got more permission properties, so I'm trying to keep that going too.
Oh,
Sweet.
Atlanta.
All right. Well,
yeah, we need to move to Pennsylvania.
I'm about to piss my pants. Can we wrap this up?
All right. Adios, amigos.
Okay.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, talk to you
All
soon,
right.
buddy. All right.
See you in Ohio.
Love you guys. See you later. See ya.